They called it the Harmony, a gentle word for a gilded cage. On Earth, the sky was always a soft, cloudless blue, courtesy of the ethel atmospheric processors that spun in silent, elegant orbits above us. The air in the city of Unity tasted sweet, clean, laced with a faint, floral scent that calmed the nerves and dulled the edges of any sharp thoughts. We were told it was the scent of progress, of a new age where humanity had finally been welcomed into the galactic fold, guided by the wise and ancient ethel. They had come to us not with warships and threats, but with gifts medicine that cured every disease, technology that ended hunger, and the greatest gift of all, peace. A deep, placid, unshakable peace that settled into your bones and made the very concept of conflict feel like a distant, nonsensical dream. I worked in sanitation, Sector Gamma 9, a cog in the city's immaculate machine. My days were a predictable rhythm of guiding sweeper drones through pristine plazas, incinerating the day's minimal waste, and returning to my small, efficient living pod. Like everyone else, I was content. I felt no ambition beyond my assigned role, no anger at the patronizing way the ethel-tall, willowy beings of light and grace would sometimes drift past, their chimes of a voice offering gentle encouragement. You maintain the balance, Kalen, the proctor of our sector once told me, its featureless face glowing with a soft, internal luminescence. There is honor in all functions that serve the whole. I had smiled, a placid, easy smile that required no effort, and nodded honor. It was a nice thought, as smooth and sterile as the white walls of my pod. The change came not as a thunderclap, but as a jolt of raw, forgotten electricity. A protein slurry pipe had burst in the underlevels, a rare malfunction in a system designed for perfection. My schematic led me deep into the city's guts, to a nexus of humming power conduits that fed the mag rails above. The air was thick with the tang of ozone and hot metal, a stark contrast to the perfumed air of the city. As I worked to seal the rupture, a cascade of warning lights flickered on a nearby panel. A pressure regulator was failing. Before I could even process the alert, a conduit ruptured with a deafening crack. A wave of pure, blue-white energy slammed into me, throwing me against the far wall. The world dissolved into a blinding flash and a scream of tearing metal. I remember the pain, a sharp, searing agony unlike anything I had ever known. The Harmony was designed to suppress such feelings, to keep everything at a manageable, muted level, but this was a roaring fire in my nerves, a feeling so intense it was almost clarifying. I lay there for a long time, the emergency strobes painting the tunnel in frantic strokes of red, my body twitching. When I finally staggered to my feet, something was different. The world seemed sharper, louder. The hum of the conduits wasn't a background drone anymore. It was a grating, invasive noise, the floral scent of the upper levels, filtering down through the vents. Was sickeningly sweet, a cloying lie. When the ethel enforcers hulking, silent machines that glided on cushions of anti-gravity arrived, one of their masters was with them. It drifted towards me, its light soft and concerned. "You are distressed, Kalen." It chimed, its voice a symphony of soothing tones. "An unfortunate accident. We will take you to a recalibration center. You will be at peace again soon." It reached out a long, slender appendage to rest on my head, a gesture of comfort I had received 100 times before. But this time, as its cool skin touched my forehead, a feeling I had no name for erupted in my chest. It was hot and sharp and ugly. My hand shot up and slapped the ethels away. A gasp. Not from me, but from the ethel itself, a discordant, surprised chime. The enforcer drones immediately shifted, their metallic bodies humming with a new, menacing energy. I saw my own reflection in their polished chrome faces, and for the first time in my life, I saw a stranger. My eyes were wide, my teeth were bared in a snarl, and my whole body was trembling, not with fear, but with this new, terrible feeling. Rage. The word appeared in my mind like a ghost from another life. They didn't take me to recalibration, not right away. They put me in an observation cell, a seamless white room where the air was thick with pacifying agents. But the chemicals no longer worked their magic. The sweet scent only made me angrier. My mind, free from the nanitic shackles that had bound it for 28 years, was a chaotic storm. Memories, feelings, and ideas crashed into one another with dizzying speed. I began to see the world not as it was presented, but as it was. The ethel weren't saviors. They were zookeepers. Humanity wasn't their partner. We were their prize exhibit, a once dangerous species now tamed, declawed, and put on display. The harmony wasn't a gift. It was a leash. I started testing my new reality. I thought about violence, about striking the smooth, white wall until my knuckles bled. The thought itself was a thrill, a forbidden taste of some essential, long-dormant part of my soul. I remembered fragments of stories, half-erased whispers my grandfather used to tell before his final recalibration. Stories of a time before the ethel, a time of fire and noise, of great cities that clawed at the sky, and men who crossed oceans not in peaceful communion, but in metal beasts of war. He called them monsters. He had been taught to call them that. But now, sitting in that white cage, I wondered. I started watching the ethel who observed me through the transparent wall. Their placid to serene glow now seemed like a mask, hiding a cold, clinical curiosity. They were studying a glitch in their system. I was an error to be corrected. One day, they brought in another human, a woman with the same placid, empty smile as everyone else. "Kaylin," she said, her voice a soft monotone. "You're causing dissonance. Your energy is disruptive. Please, accept the harmony. Return to the balance." I looked at her, truly looked, and saw the network of faintly glowing nanoports on her temple, the same ones I no longer possessed. She was a puppet, and the ethel held her strings. "Do you even know what you've lost?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. Her smile didn't falter. "We have lost nothing. We have gained peace." It was then that I knew I would rather die than return to that state of blissful ignorance. My deviance was escalating. The ethel were growing impatient. I knew the enforcers would come for me soon. And this time there would be no observation. This time, they would strap me down and flood my system with a fresh batch of nanites, burying the man who had woken up under a new layer of placid contentment. The night the enforcers came, the door to my cell didn't hiss open. It exploded inward. A concussion blast sent the two gliding drones staggering back, their internal gyros screaming. A figure stood in the smoke-filled doorway, silhouetted against the corridor lights. She was human, dressed in dark, patched together gear that seemed to absorb the light. Her face was grim, etched with lines of distrust, and her eyes were alive, burning with an intensity I was just beginning to understand in myself. "You're making a lot of noise," she said, her voice a low growl. She tossed a small metallic disc at my feet. "Disruptor. It'll mask your biosignature for 10 minutes. Move." I didn't hesitate. I followed her out of the cell and into the pristine white corridors, now scarred with the black blast mark from her explosive. Alarms were beginning to chime, a frantic, discordant melody that was a far cry from the usual soothing tones of the city. She moved with a frightening efficiency, a predator in a world of sheep. We didn't take the main corridors. She wrenched open a floor panel, revealing a dark, cavernous space below. The old world, the maintenance tunnels. "Down," she commanded. "Don't touch the walls." The drop was jarring, and we landed on a rusted catwalk overlooking a chasm of forgotten infrastructure. The air here was raw, tasting of rust and decay and real, unfiltered air. It was glorious. "Who are you?" I asked, scrambling to keep up as she sprinted along the narrow walkway. "Someone who remembers," she snapped back, not slowing. "We call ourselves the Whispers, because if they hear you, you're dead." Behind us, I could hear the hum of enforcer drones descending into the tunnels. Their searchlights cut sterile beams through the oppressive dark. We ran for what felt like hours, deeper and deeper into the city's forgotten heart, a maze of pipes, conduits, and abandoned transit tubes from a time before the Ethel. My body, accustomed to a life of placid movement, screamed in protest. My lungs burned, but the rage in my chest burned hotter, fueling me, pushing me forward. This woman, this whisper, was my only link to a truth I had just discovered, and I would not lose it. She finally led me to what looked like a dead end, a solid wall of ferrocrete deep in an abandoned subway station. But as she pressed a sequence of seemingly random cracks in the wall, a section of it ground open, revealing a hidden sanctuary. The space inside was lit by bare electric bulbs, casting a harsh glare on a collection of scavenged equipment, cots, and a small group of people whose faces all wore the same hard, haunted look as my rescuer. They were all awake. Her name was Ilara. She didn't offer me comfort or a gentle introduction. She shoved me into a chair and stood over me, her arms crossed. "The pulse in the conduit didn't just wake you up," she said, her eyes narrowing. "It sent a surge through their network. A biosignature anomaly. That's how we found you. But it's also how they'll keep hunting you." She gestured to a table cluttered with strange artifacts. There were books, their paper pages brittle with age, filled with dense black symbols. There was a device that played music, a harsh, chaotic, and beautiful noise of screaming guitars and pounding drums that vibrated right through my soul. She showed me images on a cracked data slate, records from the before times, pictures of soldiers with fire in their eyes, politicians shouting with passion, crowds of people rioting for belief, artists splashing vibrant, angry colors onto canvases. It was a history of chaos, of pain, of terrible violence. It was the history of humanity. "They told us we were flawed, a species prone to self-destruction," Ilara said, her voice laced with a venomous contempt. "They said their harmony was a cure. It's not a cure. It's an amputation. They cut out the part of us that dreams, that fights, that strives for more than just contentment. They've turned our planet into a garden, and they're slowly weeding out anything that doesn't fit their aesthetic. She picked up a heavy, black object from the table. It was a pistol, an ancient piece of projectile weaponry. This is what we were, not just peaceful gardeners. We were explorers, conquerors, poets, and monsters. We were everything. And they're afraid that if we wake up, we'll be everything again. She looked me dead in the eye, the silence in the room pressing in on me. The choice was unspoken but clear. I could try to find a way back to the surface. Let them find me. Let them push the needle in and erase this terrible, beautiful awakening. Or I could stay here, in the dark, with these broken, angry people who were the last embers of humanity's true fire. I looked down at my hands. For the first time, I noticed they were clenched into tight, white-knuckled fists. The feeling was unfamiliar, but it felt right. It felt like coming home. They wanted a species that knew its limits, I said, the words feeling strange and powerful in my mouth. They haven't even seen us wake up yet. The awakening wasn't a single event. It was a constant, brutal rebirth. My first week with the Whispers was a lesson in pain. Every muscle, conditioned by a lifetime of gentle, purposeful movements, screamed in agony. Elara didn't train me to fight. She handed me over to a man named Silas, a relic from a forgotten age. He was old, his skin a roadmap of scars, his knuckles thick as stone. He claimed to remember the twilight of the before times, the chaos of the first pacification. He never spoke of it, but you could see it in his eyes, a haunted, weary storm that had never settled. His training was simple and cruel. He taught me how to make a fist, how to put my weight behind a punch, how to take a blow without shattering. The harmony makes you soft, he'd rasp, his voice like grinding rock, after sending me sprawling onto the cold concrete floor. It teaches you to yield. You need to unlearn that. You need to remember how to be an anchor, how to be a wall. I spent days learning how to fall, how to bleed, how to get back up when every instinct, conditioned and new, told me to stay down. The rage that had been my fuel was a wild, useless fire. It made me clumsy, predictable. Silas would sidestep my furious lunges with ease, a flick of his wrist sending me off balance. Rage is a tool, he'd grunt, standing over me. It's a hammer. You're swinging it like a child. You learn to aim it, or you'll only ever break yourself. While my body was being broken and reforged, my mind was being dismantled by Ren, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20. He was a bundle of nervous energy, his fingers always twitching, his eyes darting back and forth as if watching data streams only he could see. He was born in the darkness of the underlevels, a child of whispers. And the Ethel's world was a foreign concept he knew only as a system to be exploited. He taught me the architecture of our prison. He showed me how the Ethel network monitored everything, from atmospheric composition to the serotonin levels of every citizen. It was a web of absolute control, woven with light and data. They see everything. Kalen, he explained, his voice a rapid-fire whisper as he pointed to a schematic projected from a scavenged device. Every heartbeat, every respiration. They don't look for rebellion, they look for dissonance, for statistical anomalies in the great placid equation of humanity. You weren't a threat. You were a rounding error. That's why you're still alive. Ren taught me how to become invisible, how to mimic the biorhythms of a contented citizen, how to mask my energy signature with crude, flickering disruptors. The hardest lessons, however, came from Ilara. She taught me the philosophy of their war. It was a war of memory. She made me read the brittle pages of the ancient books, tales of empires and revolutions, of love that drove men to madness and hate that forged them into legends. She made me listen to the chaotic, screaming music until the rhythms made sense, until I understood it was the sound of a soul refusing to be quiet. They want us to forget this, she'd say, her voice low and fierce in the dim light of their sanctuary. They want us to believe we were only ever savages, and that they saved us from ourselves. But we were more than that. The chaos was part of us. The fire that burned our world also forged the stars. They can't comprehend that. They see a fire, and their only instinct is to extinguish it. My first real test came a month after my escape. Ilara gathered the 5 of us, me, Silas, Ren, and another whisper named Jara, a scout with unnervingly silent footsteps, around the central table. A holographic image of a building shimmered in the air. It was a crystalline dome, glowing with soft light, nestled in a lush, green park on the city's surface, the Elysian Arboretum. It's not just a museum for extinct plants, Ilara began, her tone all business. The lower levels house a biorepository. The Ethel have been collecting genetic material since their arrival. Every species of plant, animal, and us. They have a vault containing thousands of samples of pre-harmony human DNA. Silas grunted. Souvenirs from their conquest. More than that, Ren interjected, his fingers flying across his data slate. Our long-range scans have picked up strange energy signatures from the vault, high-frequency genetic sequencers. They're not just storing it, they're actively working on it. We need to know why. We need a sample of the original, unaltered code they're keeping. The mission was simple. Infiltrate the Arboretum, access the sub-level vault, secure a sample, and get out. The problem was my face. My biosignature was now flagged in every ethel sensor network. To walk on the surface was to invite an immediate response. That's the point, Ilara said, looking directly at me. You're the diversion. Your dissonant signature is loud. We're going to give you a modified disruptor, one that will leak just enough of your true signature to draw their attention. While the enforcers are closing in on your position in the park, Silas and Yara will breach the vault. Ren will run interference from here. You just have to stay mobile and stay alive for 12 minutes. 12 minutes. It sounded like a lifetime. The idea of returning to that placid, sun-drenched world, not as a compliant citizen, but as a ghost, a piece of bait, filled me with a cold dread that was sharper than any rage. The ascent to the surface was a journey through time. We climbed through forgotten service ladders and ventilation shafts, the air growing sweeter and cleaner with every level, the scent of the harmony creeping back into my senses like a slow-acting poison. When we pushed open a maintenance hatch into the sunlight of Unity Park, the brilliance was blinding. The sky was that same, perfect, artificial blue. The air was warm and carried the gentle, calming floral scent. People drifted along the pathways, their faces serene, their movements graceful. A child laughed nearby, a sound as perfectly modulated and pleasant as a wind chime. For a terrifying moment, the peace of it all washed over me. A tempting whisper to simply lie down in the soft grass and let the tranquility take me back. Then I saw Alara watching me, her expression hard as flint, and the memory of Silas's fist hitting my gut flared in my mind. I was not one of them anymore. I was a wolf in their sheep pasture. I activated the leaky disruptor and began to walk. The feeling was surreal. I moved among them, a ghost of a dead man. No one looked at me twice. I was just another face in the placid crowd, but I could feel the network watching. It was a faint prickling on my skin, a subtle hum in the air that no one else could perceive. I was a discordant note in their perfect symphony, and the conductor was turning its attention toward me. Through a hidden audio link, Ren's voice was a frantic whisper in my ear. They see you, Kalen. A minor anomaly. They're cross-referencing. Just keep moving. Head toward the fountain. I walked, forcing myself to maintain the slow, easy gait of the pacified. I passed couples holding hands, their smiles gentle and vacant. I saw an Ethel Proctor drifting through a crowd of children, its light glowing with benevolent warmth. The sight of it sent a spike of pure hatred through me, so hot it almost made me stumble. Easy, Alara's voice cut in, a sharp command on the same channel. Control it. You're a storm. Don't let them see the lightning. I took a breath, shoving the rage down, banking it like a coal. Signature match confirmed, Ren hissed. They know it's you. Enforcer units dispatched. ETA 4 minutes. Silas. Jara. You're on. My part in the plan was simple run. The moment Ren gave the word, I broke from my placid walk into a dead sprint. The change was instantaneous. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Their serene faces registered confusion, a mild disturbance in their perfect day. It was like a stone skipping across a glassy pond. I vaulted over a low hedge, my body screaming in protest, but responding with the desperate strength Silas had beaten into me. The park was designed for leisurely strolls, not frantic escapes. I dodged and weaved through ornamental gardens and placidly smiling citizens, the hum of approaching enforcer drones growing louder behind me. They were fast, silent killers, gliding a meter above the ground. A plasma bolt seared the air past my ear, vaporizing a perfectly sculpted rose bush. The scent of burned sugar and ozone filled the air. They're in. Ren's voice crackled. 2 minutes. Kalen. Just give them 2 more minutes. I risked a glance back. 3 enforcers were closing the distance, their chrome bodies gleaming in the artificial sunlight. There was no escape in the open. I spotted the arboretum, the massive glass dome shimmering like a jewel. It was my only chance for cover. I veered toward it, my lungs on fire. The peaceful chimes of the city's ambient sound system, now a mocking soundtrack to my own private hell. I slammed into the arboretum's main doors, expecting them to be locked. They slid open with a gentle hiss. Inside, the air was humid and thick with the smell of damp earth and exotic blossoms. It was a jungle under glass, a beautiful, sterile monument to a world that no longer existed. The enforcers glided in behind me, their plasma cannons whining as they charged. I scrambled for cover behind a display of giant, prehistoric ferns. I was trapped. It was over. Then, a new voice entered my head, not through the audio link, but directly in my thoughts. It was smooth, calm, and impossibly ancient. You are dissonant, human. Your pain is a flaw in the pattern. Cease your struggle. Let us restore your peace. An Ethel Proctor stood on the far side of the main chamber, partially obscured by hanging vines. It hadn't glided in, it had simply been there, waiting. It wasn't addressing me with its chimes. This was a direct, mental touch, a wave of calming influence so powerful it felt like a physical weight. My rage began to dissolve. The terror in my heart softened. The urge to fight, to run, was being replaced by a deep, weary desire to simply stop. Peace is your birthright. You have fought so hard. You deserve to rest. My grip on the rage, my anchor, was slipping. I could feel the blissful emptiness of the harmony beckoning, a warm ocean promising to drown all my pain. But then, through the psychic fog, I heard another voice, a memory from the darkness of the underlevels. Silas. Grunting. Rage is a hammer. Learn to aim it. I looked at the ethel, at its serene, glowing form, and I focused every ounce of my fear, my pain, and my hatred into a single point. I didn't just feel the rage, I became it. The psychic pressure in my head shattered. The ethel recoiled, its smooth light flickering for a second as it let out a chime that was not a word, but a sound of pure shock. In that instant of surprise, I moved. I grabbed a heavy, petrified log from a display and charged, not at the drones, but at the ethel itself. The enforcers fired, but I was already too close. I brought the log down in a desperate two-handed swing, crashing it into one of the ethel's slender, crystalline limbs. There was a sound like shattering glass and a high-pitched chime of agony, a raw, genuine sound of pain that I had never imagined one of them could make. Its inner light flared violently, and the enforcer drones froze. Their targeting systems momentarily scrambled by their master's distress. "We have it! Get out now!" Jara's voice screamed in my ear. That was all I needed. I dropped the log and ran. Not back the way I came, but deeper into the artificial jungle, toward the emergency exit Ren had unlocked for me. As I burst back out into the blue sky, I didn't look back. But the ethel's shriek of pain echoed in my mind. It was a terrible sound, but it was also the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. It was the sound of a god learning it could bleed. Back in the sanctuary, bruised and exhausted, we watched as Ren analyzed the data from the genetic sample. His usual nervous energy was gone, replaced by a still, cold horror. He looked up from his slate, his face pale. "It's worse than we thought," he whispered. "They're not just storing our DNA. They're refining it. They've isolated the genetic sequences responsible for aggression, ambition, nonconformity, what they call dissonance. They're systematically deleting them from the code." He took a shaky breath. "They're not just trying to keep us pacified. They're trying to edit humanity, to create a final, permanent version that's incapable of ever waking up again. This vault isn't a museum, it's a laboratory. And we are the final experiment." The revelation in the vault data changed everything. We were no longer just rebels fighting for a forgotten memory. We were archivists fighting against our own extinction. The ethel weren't zookeepers, they were editors. And humanity's final draft was a creature we would not recognize as our own. The weight of this knowledge settled on our small group like a shroud. Silas became even more withdrawn, spending hours staring at his scarred hands as if seeing them for the first time as a genetic flaw. Ren grew obsessive, barely sleeping, his eyes bloodshot as he dug deeper into the stolen data, searching for a vulnerability in their grand design. Jara practiced her silent movements with a new, lethal intensity. And Elara. Our anchor seemed to harden, her resolve crystallizing into something sharp and dangerous. She knew that our small band of whispers was not enough. We were a spark in a vast, dark room, and we would be snuffed out if we didn't find a way to start a fire. There are others, she announced one evening, her voice cutting through the tense silence of the sanctuary. Dissonance isn't as rare as they want us to believe. The conduit blast that woke you, Kalen, wasn't the first. There are accidents, system malfunctions, moments where the mask slips. Most who awaken are caught and recalibrated within hours, but some escape. They go to ground, hiding in the forgotten spaces, just like us. We call them echoes, faint signals of the humanity that once was. We need to find them. We need to unite them. Our mission shifted from sabotage to recruitment. Ren, using the Ethel's own surveillance network against them, began to hunt for patterns, for the faintest statistical whispers that suggested a mind breaking free from the harmony. He found one in the industrial sector of Meridian, a sprawling complex of automated factories that forged the gleaming chrome of the Enforcer drones and the crystalline components of Ethel technology. The anomaly was a work stoppage on an assembly line, a repeated rhythmic pattern of microsecond delays that dose to the Ethel's logic engines, registered as a minor mechanical fault, but to Ren, it looked like a code. "It's an old Morse signal," he whispered, his face illuminated by the glow of his screen. "An S. O. S. Someone is awake, and they're screaming into the void the only way they know how." The factory was a fortress. Unlike the public spaces of Unity, Meridian was a place of pure function, patrolled by advanced enforcer models and overseen by Ethel technicians. A frontal assault was suicide. We needed a ghost, someone who could walk through the front door. "They're still looking for you." "Kalen," Alara said, her gaze intense. "Your violent outburst at the Arboretum has made you a priority target. But your biosignature is the only one they have on file for a dissonant human. They don't know what we look like. So, we'll give them a different face to hunt." The plan was audacious. Jara, our master of stealth, would infiltrate a medical facility and acquire a dose of the Ethel's recalibration nanites. We would then use our limited medical supplies to perform a controlled injection on one of our own, dampening their dissonant energy just enough to pass a low-level sensor scan. That person would go into the factory, find the source of the signal, and guide them out. The volunteer was Silas. He argued that his own scarred body was the most expendable, a claim Ilara immediately shut down. "You're our memory, old man," she said, a rare softness in her voice. "We lose you. We lose the before times." I volunteered next. I was the newest, the one with the least specialized skills. But Ilara shook her head. "No, you're our hammer now, and I might need you to break something." In the end, the choice fell to Jara. She was small, fast, and her control was absolute. If anyone could endure the nanites without succumbing to their placid influence, it was her. I watched as she lay on a cot, her face a mask of calm determination as Silas administered the injection. We all watched as the telltale glow of the nanoports appeared on her temple, faint but present. A wave of nausea rolled through me. We were using the enemy's poison to fight them, a compromise that felt dangerously close to a defeat. Jara blinked, her eyes clearing. "I can feel it," she whispered, her voice disturbingly serene. "It's quiet in my head, The anger is gone. Alara gripped her shoulder, hard. Remember the mission, Jara. Remember who you are. Yara's eyes met hers, and for a second, a flicker of the old fire returned. I remember, she said, but her voice was a monotone. While Jara prepared for her infiltration, my mission was different. Alara believed the ethel response would be faster and more aggressive this time. My role was to create a secondary, more violent diversion on the far side of the Meridian sector. I was to be the monster they were already hunting. Silas gave me my tools, a set of high-yield plasma charges scavenged from a disabled enforcer and a detonator. This isn't like the Arboretum, he warned, his voice a low growl. You're not running. You're making a stand. Find a choke point. Make them come to you. You're not buying minutes this time. You're buying blood. We moved through the underlevels, splitting up as we neared the Meridian sector. Alara and Ren would monitor from a forward command post, a cramped junction box pulsing with stolen data feeds. Jara, now cloaked in the false serenity of the nanites, would walk through the factory gates as a shift change worker. Silas and I would proceed to the target, a primary power conduit that fed the entire northern factory grid. As I crawled through a final, narrow ventilation shaft and looked down upon the conduit, a massive, throbbing artery of a cable housed in a deep concrete trench, the scale of my task settled in. This wasn't a distraction, it was a declaration of war. I planted the charges, my hands steady, my mind a cold, clear lake of purpose. Silas's training, Alara's lessons, the memory of that ethel's scream of pain, it had all led to this. I wasn't just Kalen, the sanitation worker, anymore. I was a weapon. I was humanity's rage, given form and a detonator. She's in. Ren's voice crackled in my ear. Signal is clean. They've accepted her. A wave of relief, quickly suppressed. Now it was my turn. I found my choke point, a narrow maintenance bridge spanning the trench, the only access point for 100 meters in either direction. I settled in behind a thick support pillar, the detonator clutched in my hand. And I waited. The silence was absolute, broken only by the deep, resonant hum of the conduit below. It was the sound of the ethel's power, their lifeblood, and I was about to give it a heart attack. Jara's moving toward the signal, Ren reported. She's close. They're on line 37. But, oh no, there's an ethel technician on the floor. It's moving toward the same location. It must have detected the original anomaly. My heart hammered against my ribs. Jara was walking into a trap. Kalen. Ilara's voice was ice. Now. I didn't hesitate. I thumbed the detonator. The world erupted in a flash of white light and a concussive roar that felt like it cracked the very foundations of the factory. The massive conduit below ruptured, spewing a torrent of blue-white plasma that turned the concrete trench into a river of fire. Alarms blared to life across the entire sector, a cacophony of shrieking sirens that shattered the industrial hum. The diversion was more successful than I could have imagined. Within minutes, the sky was filled with the hum of enforcer patrols converging on my position. They're taking the bait, Ren shouted, his voice tinged with awe. The entire sector's security grid is focused on Ujaras off their radar. I watched as the first enforcer unit glided onto the far side of the bridge. It paused, its optical sensors glowing red as it scanned the wreckage. I was hidden, but not for long. I gripped the scavenged plasma rifle Silas had given me, the weapon heavy and unfamiliar in my hands. This was the moment of truth. Running was no longer an option. I had to become the wall. The first plasma bolt seared the air, striking the pillar I was hiding behind and showering me with superheated concrete dust. I returned fire, my shot wild, splashing harmlessly off the drone's chrome chassis. It advanced, its movements smooth and implacable. Another drone appeared behind it. I was outgunned, outmatched. But I had rage, and I had a choke point. I fired again, this time aiming for the narrow bridge supports. The shot was lucky, striking a join and sending a shower of sparks into the air. The lead drone faltered for a second as the bridge trembled. It was enough. I broke cover, sprinting across the bridge toward them, firing as I ran. My mind was empty of everything but the target. My shots were still clumsy, but my aggression was something their logic processors couldn't anticipate. I was a chaotic variable in their perfect equation. I slammed my shoulder into the lead drone, the impact jarring my entire skeleton, but it sent the machine skidding sideways. It tried to correct, but its anti-grav emitters scraped against the damaged bridge railing, and with a screech of tortured metal, it pitched over the side and plunged into the river of plasma below. One down. The second drone corrected, its cannon locking onto me. I had nowhere to go. I braced for the shot. The end. But the shot never came. From the far side of the bridge, a second figure appeared. A woman with a shock of white hair and a face that was a mask of cold fury. She held a heavy, industrial cutting tool, its plasma torch flaring to life. She brought it down in a vicious arc, cleaving the second enforcer drone nearly in two. The woman turned to look at me, her eyes the color of a winter sky. She was covered in grease and grime, her factory jumpsuit torn. She was the one. The Echo. Jara found me, the woman said, her voice a low, gravelly rasp. Told me a crazy story about a man who liked to blow things up. She offered me a hand, pulling me to my feet. Behind her, Jara appeared, her face pale, the placid expression of the nanites fighting with the grim reality of the battle. She held a small, struggling figure in her arms, a young boy, no older than 10. His eyes wide with a terror that was shockingly, beautifully human. They had his son, Jara said, her voice a strained monotone. They were using him to keep her compliant after she woke up. The woman's name was Lena. She was the factory's chief mechanic, and for the last 6 months, since a power surge had fried her own nanites, she had been a prisoner, forced to maintain the machines that built our cages, with her son's life as the price of her silence. Her so wasn't a call for rescue, it was a call for vengeance. The Ethel technician, I asked. It's dead, Lena said, a grim satisfaction in her voice. Jara kept it busy. I introduced it to a hydraulic press. The four of us stood on that damaged bridge, the fires of the ruptured conduit raging below, the sound of more approaching enforcers filling the air. We were a sanitation worker, a traumatized scout, a grieving mother, and a terrified child. We were a broken, pathetic, and utterly hopeless rebellion. But as I looked at the fierce, unyielding anger in Lena's eyes and the nascent spark of defiance in her son's, I felt something new, something more powerful than rage. It was hope, a terrible, jagged, and beautiful hope. We need to go, Jara urged, her control beginning to fray. They're sending more, and these nanites, I can't fight them for much longer. We retreated back into the darkness of the underlevels, but this time, Our numbers had grown. We were no longer just an echo. We were becoming a voice, and we were about to get much, much louder. The hope we carried back from Meridian was a fragile, flickering candle, and the sanctuary felt less like a fortress and more like a tomb. The victory was immediately eclipsed by the chilling reality of Jara's condition. The Harmony nanites were no longer just dampening her dissonance. They were actively rewriting her. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by a placid, terrifying calm. She would sit for hours, staring at a blank wall, a faint, serene smile on her lips. When she spoke, her voice was the soft, melodic monotone of the pacified. She was an enemy ghost wearing our friend's face. The sight of her broke something in all of us. Ren worked with a desperate, feverish intensity. His corner of the sanctuary, a chaotic mess of wires, data slates, and scavenged medical equipment. He was trying to create a localized electromagnetic pulse, something precise enough to fry the nanites in her system without boiling her blood. The technology is theoretical, he'd mutter, not looking up from his work, his hands shaking. The Ethel designed them to be fail-safe. They integrate with the host's neural pathways. Ripping them out is like ripping out her soul. Alara stood vigil by Jara's side, her face a mask of stone, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the back of a chair. The guilt was radiating from her in cold waves. This was her command, her calculated risk. And she was watching the cost of it play out in real time. Lena, the woman from the factory, and her son, Leo, brought a new, raw energy to our small world. Lena was not a soldier trained in the art of quiet rebellion. She was a mechanic, a problem solver. She looked at our scavenged, failing equipment, not with resignation, but with a builder's critical eye. She moved through the sanctuary with a restless energy, tightening loose connections, rerouting power to be more efficient, and reinforcing the crumbling walls of our hiding place. She rarely spoke of her ordeal, but her anger was a constant, simmering heat beneath the surface. It wasn't the explosive rage that fueled me, but a slow burning, patient fire. It was the fury of a mother who had seen the monster that wanted to hollow out her child. Her son, Leo, was our silent shadow. He watched everything with wide, intelligent eyes. A child who had been forced to grow up too fast. He would sit for hours watching Silas painstakingly clean and maintain our ancient projectile weapons, his small face a study in concentration. He never made a sound, but his presence was a constant, powerful reminder of what was at stake. It was no longer just about reclaiming a lost past. It was about fighting for a future that had a right to feel, to hurt, to burn. I found myself watching him, this small, unbroken boy. In his quiet defiance, I saw a flicker of the humanity we were fighting for, something beyond the simple urge to break things. The Ethel's response to the Meridian attack was swift and insidious. There was no overt military crackdown. Instead, a new message began to filter down from the surface. The Ethel proctors, their voices smoother and more soothing than ever, spoke of a dissonant contagion, a mental sickness that caused confusion, paranoia, and violence. They spoke of us not as rebels, but as victims who needed to be healed. Enforcer patrols on the surface became more frequent, but they were accompanied by medical drones that offered voluntary wellness scans to the placid citizens. It was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. They were painting us as a disease, and their control was the cure. But there was another, More chilling development. Ren, while monitoring their internal communications, intercepted a new designation, Inquisitor. The data was heavily encrypted, but it pointed to the deployment of a specialized ethel unit, one designed not for crowd control, but for hunting individuals. "This isn't a machine," Ren whispered, his face pale. "The energy profile is biological, but amplified. It's an ethel that has been modified. They're adapting. They're learning how to hunt us in the dark." The news sent a new wave of fear through our group. We were no longer hiding from mindless machines. We were being hunted by an intelligent predator. The turning point came during Ren's fourth attempt to purge Jara. He had her connected to a crude device of his own making, a mess of coils and power cells. "I have to time the pulse to her synaptic rhythm," he explained, sweat beading on his forehead. "If I'm off by a millisecond, I could wipe her memory clean." As he initiated the sequence, Jara began to seize, her body arching off the cot, the serene smile on her face twisted into a mask of agony. Ilara cried out, moving to stop the procedure, but Silas held her back. "Let the boy work," he growled, just as it seemed we were losing her. Lena, who had been watching the power fluctuations on her own diagnostic tool, shouted, "The energy is cascading. It's going to overload." She grabbed a heavy wrench and, with a precision that defied the chaos, smashed a secondary power coupling on Ren's device. There was a sharp crack, a flash of blue light, and the machine went dead. Jara collapsed back onto the cot, unconscious. For a moment, we all thought she was dead. Then she coughed, a racking, painful sound. Her eyes fluttered open. The placid emptiness was gone. In its place was a raw, terrified confusion. The fire was back, but it was a fire born of trauma. She was herself again, but the memory of the quiet was now a fresh scar on her soul. Lena's quick thinking had saved her. Her practical knowledge had succeeded where our desperate plans had failed. In that moment, the dynamic of our group shifted. We were not just fighters. We had a builder. That night, Ilara gathered us. The victory with Jara was temporary, and we all knew it. "We can't keep fighting like this," she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "Putting out fires, one at a time. They are editing our species into extinction, and we are swatting at their hands. We need to attack the source." Ren pulled up a new schematic on the projector, one he had been working on in secret. It showed the heart of Unity City, and at its center, a single massive spire that reached into the heavens, far higher than any other structure. The ethel atmospheric processors do more than just clean the air. Ren explained. They're part of a massive broadcasting network. At the top of that spire, the ethel have a device we've codenamed the Conductor. It's the source of the harmony field, a constant, low-frequency psychic wave that blankets the entire continent. It reinforces the nanites, suppresses dissonance, keeps everyone in that state of placid contentment. If we could disable it, even for a few minutes, the quiet would stop. Jara whispered, her voice hoarse. Everyone would wake up. It was an insane plan, an impossible objective. The Conductor Spire was the most heavily guarded structure on the planet, the seat of ethel power. But it was the only plan that mattered. Attacking it wasn't just sabotage, it was a cure. To get close, we need their security protocols, their patrol routes, the spire's structural weaknesses. Ilara continued. That data isn't kept in some factory. It's stored in the Sector Gamma Command Hub, a digital fortress. Our next mission was born of that desperate hope. We had to raid the command hub, a sterile white monolith in the administrative district, and steal the key to our enemy's heart. This time, we would all go. Lena had spent the week modifying our disruptors, making them more stable, and jury-rigging a portable plasma cutter from factory parts. Silas had armed us with silent, pneumatic dart launchers for taking out sensors. Ren would be our eyes and ears, running the hack from a stolen terminal nearby, while Ilara, Jara, and I would form the infiltration team. My role was no longer just the hammer. Ilara planned a surgical strike, and I was expected to be the scalpel. We moved through the underlevels like ghosts, emerging into a sterile, white service corridor 2 levels beneath the command hub. The silence was absolute, a manufactured peace that felt more menacing than any alarm. We bypassed the first set of sensors, Jara moving with a renewed, almost reckless grace. The trauma of the nanites had honed her focus to a razor's edge. We reached the data core, a cylindrical room lined with glowing pillars of light that hummed with stored information. This was the brain of the sector's security. "I'm in," Ren's voice whispered in our ears. "But the encryption is layered. This will take time. Watch your backs." As Ren worked, a new sensation prickled at the back of my mind. It was a cold, clinical pressure, a feeling of being watched not by a camera, but by a mind. It was the same feeling I'd had in the Arboretum, but 100 times stronger. "Ilara," I whispered. "We're not alone." Before she could respond, one of the pillars of light flickered and died. A shadow detached itself from the far wall. It was an ethel, but unlike the serene proctors, this one was lean, its crystalline structure a dark, smoky quartz, and its internal light was a cold, predatory blue. It didn't glide, it moved with a silent, deliberate purpose. The Inquisitor. Your dissonance is a fascinating flaw. Its voice echoed in our minds, a sound like icebergs grinding together. It was a voice that didn't seek to soothe, but to analyze, to dissect. You struggle so hard against your own perfection. It raised one of its slender limbs, and a wave of pure psychic force slammed into me, throwing me back against the wall. It wasn't an attack of anger. It was a calculated application of pressure designed to incapacitate. Ilara and Jara opened fire, their plasma bolts splashing harmlessly against a shimmering shield of energy that enveloped the Inquisitor. It turned its featureless face toward them. Fear. Protective instincts. Such beautifully chaotic data. The pressure in my mind intensified, and images flooded my vision. The burst conduit, the ethel's scream, the ruptured power main. It was using my own rage, my own memories, as a weapon against me. It was trying to drown me in my own fire. "Got it," Ren screamed through the comms. "I have the data. Get out of there." But we were pinned. The Inquisitor was a predator toying with its prey. It took a step toward Jara, and I saw a flicker of the placid emptiness return to her eyes as the creature's mental assault focused on her fresh wounds. I wouldn't let it take her again. I pushed past the pain, the rage in my chest becoming a focused, white-hot point. I didn't have a weapon that could hurt it, but I had a body. I charged, a wordless scream tearing from my throat. and threw myself at the Inquisitor, aiming for its legs in a desperate, suicidal tackle. My impact did nothing to its shield, but my raw, chaotic energy, my pure, unthinking human violence, seemed to momentarily disrupt its focus. The psychic pressure lessened. Now, Alara screamed. She wasn't looking at the Inquisitor, she was looking up. Lena's plasma cutter, in which we had planted on the level above, roared to life, slicing a hole through the ceiling. Debris rained down, and a heavy winch cable snaked into the room. We had our escape, but as I scrambled for the cable, the Inquisitor recovered. It abandoned its psychic attacks and moved with blinding speed. It didn't target me, the aggressor. It targeted our hope. It lashed out, and its razor-sharp limb struck Alara across the back, sending her crashing to the floor, motionless. We had the data. We had the key. But our leader was down, and the hunter now knew our faces, our fears, and our scent. The hunt had just begun. The retreat from the command hub was a frantic, desperate scramble through darkness and decay. The stolen data feeling like a block of ice clutched to my chest. We carried Alara between us, her body limp, a dark stain spreading across the back of her gear. The Inquisitor didn't pursue. It didn't need to. It had wounded us in a way no plasma cannon could, striking down our mind, our strategist, our hope. Back in the sanctuary, the victory tasted like ash. Ren confirmed the data was intact. We had everything we needed to assault the spire. But the knowledge was useless. A map with no one to read it. Alara lay on a cot, stabilized by Lena's surprisingly deft medical skills. But she was unconscious, her breathing shallow. The Inquisitor's blow hadn't just been physical, it was a psychic wound, a sliver of its cold. Analytical consciousness left burrowed in her mind, keeping her adrift in a dark sea. Her absence was a crushing weight, a vacuum at the center of our small universe. We were lost. The rage that had been my compass now felt like a pointless, sputtering flame. I looked at the faces around me. Ren, defeated, staring at the useless data. Jara, her newfound freedom now tainted with the guilt of a survivor. Silas, his ancient weariness finally threatening to consume him. We were 5 broken people and a child, hiding in a hole, while a godlike predator hunted us from above. It was Lena who broke the silence, her voice cutting through the despair like a welding torch through steel. "So that's it," she demanded, wiping grease and blood from her hands. "You get the key to the whole damn prison, and because one soldier goes down, you're ready to lie down and die." She gestured furiously at the data slate. "That thing you went for, it's a schematic. It's a machine. I spent my life fixing machines they said were perfect. Nothing is perfect. Everything has a breaking point." She looked directly at me, her eyes burning with a mother's fury. "You have the anger. That old man has the experience. The kid has the brains. You want to honor your leader, then finish the job." Her words were a slap in the face, a brutal, necessary shock. She was right. We were acting like the pacified citizens we despised, waiting for someone to tell us what to do. Alara had shown us the door. We had to be the ones to kick it down. A new resolve began to form in the room, forged in our shared grief and Lena's unyielding pragmatism. The plan had to change. Stealth was no longer an option. The Inquisitor would be waiting. This couldn't be a surgical strike. It had to be a sledgehammer. Ren, his eyes regaining a spark of their manic energy, began to dissect the spire's schematics. The harmony field is psychic, but it's projected by a physical device," he explained, his voice gaining speed. "It requires an immense amount of power, channeled through harmonic amplifiers on every level. If we could create a massive, wide-spectrum electromagnetic pulse at the base of the spire, you'd fry the amplifiers," Lena finished, a slow-fry, predatory grin spreading across her face. "You'd give the machine a seizure. It wouldn't destroy the conductor, but it would disrupt the field, create chaos. It would give us a window. Our mission found its new, brutal shape. We would build a bomb. Lena became our master architect, turning our sanctuary into a chaotic workshop. She directed us with an iron will, having us cannibalize every piece of non-essential tech, stripping power cells from our disruptors, even pulling the magnetic coils from Silas's precious pneumatic launchers. She was building what she called the Scream, a massive EMP device designed to momentarily deafen the Ethel's perfect symphony. While she worked, Silas took me and Jara aside. "You're going to be a different kind of weapon now," he rasped, his eyes boring into me. "The Inquisitor knows your rage. It will use it against you. You can't be a wildfire anymore. You have to be the furnace, contained, focused. You don't burn for you. You burn for us." He taught us a new kind of control, a warrior's meditation, a way to anchor our emotions not in hatred for the enemy, but in a fierce, protective loyalty to each other. He made us the shield, while Lena built the sword. The night before the assault, I went to see Alara. She was still unconscious, but her breathing seemed stronger. I told her the plan, whispering it into the silence of the room. I told her we would not fail. As I turned to leave, her fingers twitched, brushing against my hand. It was the only signal I needed. We moved the Scream through the underlevels on a modified cargo dolly, a monstrous, ugly thing of exposed wires and humming capacitors. Our target was a primary power junction directly beneath the conductor spire. There was no subtle infiltration. We blew the access door off its hinges and wheeled our weapon into the heart of their power grid. "This is going to hurt," Lena said, making the final connection. "Good," I replied. When she threw the switch, it felt like the world tore in half. There was no sound, but a wave of pure energy washed over us, making our teeth ache and our hair stand on end. Every light in the junction flickered and died. A deep, shuddering groan echoed from the spire above. In my ear, Ren's voice was a triumphant shout. "It worked. The field is fluctuating. I am reading system-wide errors. Go now, before they can reset." We didn't need to be told twice. We charged into the spire's ground level, a grand, sterile lobby now filled with flickering emergency lights and the confused, discordant chimes of ethel constructs. The fight up the spire was a brutal vertical war. Enforcer drones, their targeting systems glitching, fired erratically. We moved with a savage efficiency, Silas and I providing cover while Jara and Lena leapfrogged between support pillars, planting smaller plasma charges on the harmonic amplifiers. With each one that blew, the oppressive psychic weight of the harmony field lessened, and the air grew clearer, sharper. As we neared the apex, the resistance stopped. The final chamber was deathly silent. At the center of the vast, circular room, the conductor pulsed with a soft, blue light, a giant, crystalline heart pumping tranquility through the veins of the world. And standing before it, waiting, was the Inquisitor. So, The flaws have learned to work in concert. Its voice echoed in our minds, colder and sharper than before. You have broken my beautiful silence. It didn't attack. It simply looked at us. And the psychic assault began. It showed Jara an image of herself, serene and smiling, her eyes empty, whispering that the peace was better than the pain. It showed Lena her son, Leo, his face going placid and blank as the nanites took hold. It showed Silas the faces of comrades from a forgotten war, accusing him of failing them. And it turned to me, flooding my mind not with rage, but with the consequences of it, the burning arboretum, the ruptured conduit, the fallen form of Alara. Your fire only creates ash. It taunted, you are the disease you claim to fight. We faltered, each trapped in our own private hell. The conductor pulsed behind the creature, and I could feel the harmony field beginning to stabilize, its soothing influence attempting poison. But then I looked at my comrades, at the real, tangible pain on their faces. Silas had taught me to be a furnace, to burn for them. The Inquisitor saw our rage, our fear, our pain as individual flaws to be exploited. It didn't understand that they were also the threads that bound us together. I closed my eyes and reached out, not with my fists, but with my mind. I focused on the raw, jagged edges of my grief for Alara, the fierce loyalty I felt for these broken warriors, the desperate hope I held for a boy I barely knew. I didn't push the feelings away. I gathered them, owned them. Then I projected them, not as an attack, but as an answer. You see our pain. I sent back, my thought a raw, unified scream. But you don't see what it builds. You see our rage, but you don't see what it protects. One by one, the others felt it. Jara pushed back with the memory of her rescue, Lena with the ferocious, unyielding power of her love for Leo, Silas with the grim, unwavering weight of his duty to remember. We wove our dissonant notes together, creating a chord of such complex, chaotic, and beautiful humanity that the Inquisitor's analytical mind could not process it. The creature staggered back, its internal light flickering violently. Its psychic shield, designed to repel singular emotions, began to fracture under the symphony of our shared soul. Impossible. It stammered. This data is illogical. It's called living. Lena snarled and raised her plasma cutter. In that moment, we opened fire as one. The Inquisitor, its defenses shattered by our psychic chorus, was engulfed in a storm of plasma and fury. Its scream was not a chime of pain, but a wail of pure, uncomprehending static as its perfect logic was annihilated by our perfect chaos. It dissolved into a shower of black dust and fading light. We didn't celebrate. We turned to the conductor, the true enemy, and unleashed everything we had left. The crystalline heart cracked, shuddered, and with a final, silent pulse of energy, it exploded, raining down harmless shards of glass and light. And then, for the first time in a generation, there was silence, a true empty silence, across the city, across the continent. Billions of minds, suddenly freed from the gentle, placid current, awoke. It was not a joyous awakening. It was a violent, terrified gasp. Imagine being asleep for 30 years and waking up in mid-fall. There were screams, cries of confusion, outbursts of long-suppressed rage and grief. The perfect tree placid garden had become a jungle of raw, untamed human emotion overnight. Our war was over. Theirs was just beginning. We stood on the apex of the spire, watching the sun rise over a city in chaos. It was terrifying. It was messy. It was beautiful. We hadn't brought peace. We had brought freedom. And the price of freedom was the right to struggle, to fail, to fight, and to build something for ourselves. Weeks later, the city was still in turmoil, but it was a living turmoil. Factions had formed. Leaders had risen and fallen. Arguments echoed in the plazas where once there had been only pleasantries. Crude, vibrant art was being splashed across the sterile white walls. Humanity was learning to walk again, and it was stumbling, but it was moving. Our group found Ilara, awake and healing, and together we watched from the shadows. We were not their leaders. We were just the memory, a reminder of the price of silence. One evening, I stood with Leo on a balcony overlooking the chaotic, vibrant city. He was sketching in a notebook, not with the perfect precision of an ethel-trained artist, but with messy, passionate strokes. He was drawing a picture of a wolf, its head thrown back in a defiant howl. "They told us we were sheep," he said quietly, not looking up. "They were wrong." I looked out at the broken, beautiful, screaming world we had unleashed. The Ethel had wanted to see our limits, to edit us down to a manageable, predictable creature. They had failed. They never understood that humanity's greatest strength wasn't our capacity for peace or order. It was our infinite, chaotic, and glorious capacity to simply begin again. And our limits were nowhere in sight.